Do you want a 15-inch laptop that weighs the same as a 13-inch Ultrabook? Well, you know what? I encourage you to check out this new 2018 LG Gram 15 Z980. Hi, this is Stephen from Owned at Disown. When I first picked up this LG Gram, I was amazed at how light it was. It weighed the same as the empty box that it came in. If I didn't know better, I would have thought it was a toy or an empty shell of a laptop, but it only weighs half a pound more than the Dell XPS 13. Incredible. Now one would think, it is made of plastic, but it's actually made out of a metal alloy of nanocarbon and magnesium. Nanocarbon is also known as graphene, and it is very elastic. So initially you feel worried that the crazy flex on the screen, is not going to make it very resilient, but it is. It's pretty bendy, but I think it will, with the extra elasticity there, it will take quite a few knocks. Now thankfully, this chassis as a whole has no flex at all, and indeed it has passed 7 durability tests according to military standard 810G. Now these include dropping from 1.2 meters 26 times, dust blowing at it at 20 miles per hour, for 12 hours, a vibration test, a salt spray test, and perhaps the more useful test, a 3-day test at temperatures up to 49 degrees Celsius. It has a tapered design, so it's thinner at the front, but even so, its max thickness is only 20 millimeters or 3/4 of an inch. This is a perfect laptop to take with you on your travels. Now, despite its thinness, it still has full-size ports. On the left-hand side, there is the power connector, a USB 3 Type A port, a full-size HDMI port, and the Thunderbolt 3 port. Now, there is no Ethernet port, so they include a USB-C dongle. On the right-hand side is the Kensington lock, 2 more USB 3 ports, a combo headphone microphone jack, and a micro SD card reader. Now, I would have much preferred to have a full-size SD card reader here, for people who use cameras a lot. Still, the reader performs very well. Writing a 4 gigabyte file to it, it operated at 49 megabytes per second, and copying it back to the SSD, it took under 8 seconds, which is very fast. There are a number of models available. Looking at Amazon, we have 2 13-inch models, where one of them being white, which sells for $1,100, gets you 8 gigabytes of RAM and a 256 gigabyte SSD and an i5 8th gen CPU. Now for an extra $300 you get the i7, but really this makes no sense, as you will see shortly. You can also get a 14-inch, but that's quite pricey at $1,550. Again, you pay for that pointless i7, but at least you get 512 gigabyte SSD. Amazon has 2 15-inch models, and probably the best value one is the i5 for $1,250. Heck, the next level up is $2,000, and apart from the Thunderbolt 3, the only other advantage is that it has 1 terabyte of storage. But we are talking $750 extra for this, so if you don't need Thunderbolt 3, do yourself a favour and get this model. Now you can buy a 1 terabyte SSD for $290 and install it yourself. The model I have here is the $2,000, and to be honest, I think it is crazy that they don't put a Thunderbolt 3 on the other models. Now I do like its design. It fits well in a business setting and looks quite sleek. Its lid has a matte finish with a silvered Gram logo written in its centre. Its 1080p screen is also pretty vibrant, and it has nice thin bezels. Last year's model had the webcam at the bottom here, so I'm very pleased that they've moved it up to the top where it makes much more sense. The palm rest has the same matte finish and is quite resistant to fingerprints. The power button also serves as a fingerprint reader, and it works really well. The keys are nice and large with good spacing, and there is a separate number pad which makes the spacebar slightly off center, but for most I am sure that is okay. The keys have a good distance of travel and are backlit white with 2 brightness levels. Now there's no one button press for volume control, I'm afraid. You have to use the function keys. The touchpad uses Windows Precision drivers. It is smooth and accurate, and gestures work well. The touchscreen is also very responsive. Now its stereo speakers are located at the front, and they fire downwards, but they are surprisingly loud at 78 decibels. I was quite impressed, to be honest with you. The 1080p panel is made by LG, and it is nice and bright. In fact, it isn't that far behind the Dell XPS 13 and matches the Asus Flip 14's 75% level even at 50%. The good news too, there is no PWM flicker even at minimum brightness, and there is no backlight bleed. Viewing angles are good, which you would expect from an IPS panel, and outdoor visibility is okay due to it being very bright, but it is very reflective. Colours are sharp and crisp, and indeed it has decent colour reproduction, similar to the XPS 13, and it is suitable for photo work. Now, air is sucked in and blown out of vents behind the hinge. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this style really, although it does free up space for more ports, but there is a risk of it getting hot. The fan is really quiet at 20 decibels, and even under full load it only goes to 21 decibels. I know what you're thinking, this thing is going to get pretty toasty. Well, let's take a look inside. To open up the back, you need to remove the plastic plugs and feet to expose the screws. The first thing you'll notice is the huge 72 watt-hour battery that is available in all the models. And this is one of its main selling points, battery life. Streaming YouTube at 25% brightness and adopting the power saver profile, I got just short of 15 hours. That is awesome. You know what? Now I have to start these tests and then go to bed because they take so long to do now. Charging wasn't super fast though. After 1 hour, it went up by 29%. Now you do have two M.2 SSD slots. They are actually PCI Express slots, but the installed Hynix drives are SATA. I have one stick of 8GB DDR4 2400 Mhz RAM with the other 8GB soldered to the motherboard. This means that you can have a max of 24GB possible. You have a very small fan and an Intel 8265 Wi-Fi card that is soldered on. And finally, you can see the two speakers. Now, before I launch into benchmarks and temperatures, it's a quick word about the turbo boost on the i7-8550U processor in the LG Gram. Now, normally you can increase the turbo power max to get a higher clock rate. Now, on the Asus Flip 14 with the same CPU, I was able to increase this value to 70 watts and get a stable 3.2 GHz under load. Now, unfortunately, on this LG Gram, no matter what value I set, the CPU would always throttle down due to temperature. Sure, a short test such as Cinebench will hold fairly steady, but anything longer, the performance will drop down again. Now, I suspect this is because of the small and low-powered fan that it has. Still, you do get 4 cores and 8 threads, so it will handle most applications quite well. Just don't expect it to break any speed records. So in Cinebench, you can see straight away that it performs less than the same CPU in the Flip 14, and in reality performs worse than the much cheaper Ryzen HP Envy. Let's look at Handbrake, which is a long encoding test. 65 minutes is quite a long time, but to put it into perspective, the 7th gen CPUs that these ones replace, they were dual cores and they took about 90 minutes. So the extra cores do help. But you can see that the similar CPUs are able to turbo boost much more, actually getting below the 50-minute mark, whilst the Gram shaves off a mere 2 minutes. Now, Adobe's Lightroom bucks the trend though, converting 50 photos to a video slideshow. In the performance settings, I selected it to just work on the CPU mode only, and I got 10 minutes, which is a great time. Now, looking at the temperatures, we get 85 degrees at stock, and applying more turbo power increases that to 90 despite the undervolt. The average clock rate remains mostly unchanged at about 2500 MHz. Compare this to the same CPU in the Flip 14. The average stock clock is the same, but the turbo clock I got was much higher at 3200 MHz, whilst temperatures were less also. I know many of you might not be using the Gram for gaming, but the HD620 GPU inside is actually quite capable at 720p low settings. Some games are playable even at medium or high settings, even at 1080p, and of course you have the Thunderbolt 3 port, which does allow you to attach an external GPU, which we will also look at. I compare gaming against the HP Envy, which has the Vega 8 graphics, and also the Dell XPS 13 that uses the same Intel HD620. So, as you can see, the Gram pretty much matches the XPS 13 as one would expect. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds had to drop to very low, but it was still playable. Rise of the Tomb Raider was barely playable though. But Battlefield 1 and Rainbow Six Siege performed very well. Games such as Doom and Overwatch are less demanding and can be played at medium to high settings, even at 1080p on Overwatch. Looking at the average clock speed of the CPU during gaming, you can see that the i7 Gram is much less than the i5 XPS13. But the frames per second was similar. Now this shows that we are GPU limited in gaming, as one would expect. The Gram would max out at 89 degrees Celsius, but note that I saw throttling as low as 84 degrees. Now hooking up my Aorus GTX 1080 gaming box and outputting to an external display at a resolution of 2560 by 1440, we see consistent performance against all three laptops. The slightly more powerful i7 7700HQ does help by, a slight margin of 6%, but nothing earth-shattering. Sure, it's a long way behind the true GTX 1080 performance, so I would recommend actually just using a GTX 1070 box instead. Either way, it does allow you to crank up those settings and have a good quality gaming experience. I know some of you are interested in how performance is affected if we switch it to the laptop display, so I ran tests at 1080p. For some reason, Tomb Raider didn't perform quite as well on the laptop display, but the trend is clear. If you want the best performance, it's better to attach the gaming box to an external monitor. So, how would I conclude? If you want a really light 15-inch laptop with okay performance but stellar battery life and want a Thunderbolt 3, then the LG Gram is a good option, but it's an expensive one, and one I think that is a little bit too expensive, to be fair. Now, if Thunderbolt 3 isn't important, then I suggest going for the 1100 13.3 inch or the i5 15 inch, which can be had for about $1,250, and expand that storage or RAM yourself. Perhaps the Samsung Notebook 9 15 inch is better value. For $1,500, you get a dedicated MX150 GPU and Thunderbolt 3. And you know what? It still weighs under 3 pounds. Anyway, I hope you liked the review. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.